Hey, welcome back to another episode of Detection at Scale. This season, as a reminder, we're focusing on the intersection of generative AI and security operations. And you'll continue to hear from practitioners about what's working and what isn't. And also head over to detectionatscale.com, which is our fresh new domain, to read longer form blogs on the topics that we discuss here. So with that, I'll introduce my guest for today. His name is Matt Domko. Matt,
Yeah.
how you doing, sir?
Pretty good, pretty good. I'm Matt Domko. I'm the head of security engineering at Rabbit. That means I get to do security for all kinds of things that I never thought I would get to specialize in.
No, I'm really excited to pick your brain there. I mean, Rabbit is it's a hardware device, right? Can you tell us a little bit about the company?
Yeah, so we'll say it's an AI walkie-talkie. You push the button and ask ChatGPT questions. But like it's kind of boring when you say it that way. But the magic is the orchestration. So instead of just go get information from the internet for me, it's actually go do something on the internet for me. And it's kind of magical because I get to do hardware security. I get to do Android security. I get to do application security. I get to do cloud security. It's like all the things that at one time this was my job, join a startup, and now you get to do them all at once. It's the first startup I've worked at. And so it should have been expected, but it didn't really hit home until like the first week.
There's definitely a new wave of AI companies, obviously, like in the last few years, both on the security side and just in general on the consumer side. So it's really cool to see a AI specialized device and how that evolves over time. I actually might get one myself. I've been thinking about it. It looks really interesting. And what else can it do? Like, what else do you find it useful for?
My sort of favorite thing is I don't want to have to make decisions, but I want to do cool stuff. And so sometimes it's really easy. Like I have access to more tools than maybe people that own a rabbit have. And so one of the things that I was tinkering with was like, hey, my wife and I want to go on a date tonight. Can you plan us an itinerary and then email her an invitation? And it goes through, it knows where I'm at. It goes and finds like a couple of cute things. It was like a movie and then a walk through the park and then something else. And then it was like, well, I can't email that to your wife, but here you go. And so it sent me the email. Those are super nice. Anytime I just want to look something up rather than breaking out my phone and losing contact with the world, it's like, hey, Siri, but it's actually going to go find you a more realistic answer. I don't know if you've ever asked like Alexa for anything, and sometimes it just kind of goes off in left field towards a thing that you don't really want. It's better than that, so that's pretty cool.
Looking forward to the day that Alexa will actually have intelligent answers. So
It's the same. They were getting close with the community answers where it could reach out and see like what did other people say, and I like it was getting better, and then now I don't know. It's probably going to get worse now because with all of the Gen AI stuff, everything is just a lot easier to do at scale now. And so, like, was it probably 4 or 5 years ago? I was doing detection and response. And there's like this sort of standard playbook for, oh, this is a phishing email. Let me check these headers. Let me check all of these things that need to be verified. Or there are links inside of it. Okay, let me grab those and analyze those. And setting up all of that for a phishing campaign was really, really hard. But now I can just go into ChatGPT and say, hey, here's everything about Jack. If you could create the world's greatest phishing email for Jack and give it to me, I'll put it into an email and send it to him. And it'll go do it. So it's like spear phishing on demand nowadays. The joys of generative AI.
how can we defend against that?
A lot of tiers, I think, are going to be involved. I'm not seeing like the traditional email security solutions sort of catching up with those types of attacks. They're like, so if you were a proof point shop 5 years ago, you were probably like, oh, I should probably switch to like a new product that does more API integrations and they're actually using machine learning to come up with detections. And so you saw that and you switched to this whole new class of email detection. now we're hitting that same phase where, okay, I can't just check the same domain and the same strings to try and track down all of the emails. You have to go a step further. I do see someone essentially training a bunch of LLMs to detect the attacks better, but it's still it's a hard problem to solve, because what might be a spear phishing attack to you might just be like a normal Tuesday at my house. And so it's hard. And I think user training is probably the closest that we're going to get over the short term, is just having people realize, if my heart starts to beat harder whenever I see something from the internet, that's probably on purpose, and I probably shouldn't like rush to take action based on it. Does that make sense?
I actually really love that way of framing a phishing attack. It's, if I'm getting nervous, don't take immediate action, but maybe just like pause and ask a question first.
No, exactly. And because, so whether it's like email phishing or somebody calling you up, I met the head of security at Choice Hotels the other day. My mom manages a Choice Hotel, and in talking to him about their security program, I was like, "Hey, can I tell a fun story?" We're in front of a group of like 50, 60 people in Minneapolis, and he looks at me and he's like, "I mean, it's too late now, so sure." And so I tell him the story about the front desk clerk getting a call saying, "Hey, this is Choice Hotels. You've got malware in your system. I need you to go to this URL, type in this code, and then give me access to all of your systems." And so we're like talking through what happened. And in reality, the reason why that worked is because that front desk clerk, their heartbeat jumped from 70 beats per minute to 90 beats per minute. And they decided, oh, I need to do what this person says. So the more we can get our employees to recognize, hey, you're at work. Unless you're a doctor, nobody's going to die if you don't move immediately. Slow down, take a breath.
It also doesn't help that LLMs are multimodal. So what you're saying can now even be automated. Use a realistic voice of this executive that, we have lots of recordings of. That's it's a very dangerous thing.
One of our community members was joking about grabbing a clip from one of my talks and training Bland to to do my voice, and then making it the voice of their R1. It felt really, really good, but then also it felt really, really scary that over the last 10 years, I never worried about, can someone clone my voice? But I have a site now that I can go to and say, call my wife and ask her about this. And the rabbit will go to that site, type in her phone number and call her and ask her about that. She's not a fan of that feature. Not a fan at all. But like, it's a thing you can do.
Well, speaking of, maybe it's a good pivot into defense, but on the topic of detection, how are you seeing improvements in traditional detection engineering and response with the introduction of LLMs and agents?
I think that given a good foundation, it makes it really easy to scale up your security engineering program. And what I mean by that is, there are companies that I've joined and the security team just sort of operated tools. So we bought a tool, we installed it, and now we just sit and watch what the tool does until it's our turn to click the button. So when I join those companies, we generally take some time understanding what data do we have access to. And then we build the world's greatest SIM, which is a Postgres database and a bunch of, I understand what data I'm putting in here, with targeted queries that actually pull that data out. And so rather than just like assuming that I can pay to have security solved, the team thinks about like what techniques are being applied towards us, and they build queries on that data to sort of let them know, hey, something weird is happening here. And so, okay, we have this idea, we're going to switch from just running the tool to being engineers, but now you have to actually build custom things. You need Docker containers, you need Lambda functions, you need S3 to store all of this data until you've processed it, or if you've got a lot of data, you need S3 to store it so that you can query it in Athena. And that's a lot of big words to somebody who's never written something in the cloud from scratch before. And so with LLMs making it so that I can say, here's a copy of a templated function. Doesn't do anything right now, but this is the pattern I want to follow. I have a data source. Here's 5 lines of the data source. It looks like this. I would like you to update the code so that it'll go into this specific table. It'll do it. It'll spit out the code that maybe you were intimidated to write it first. And now that it's there, the hard part is done. You've gotten started. You submit a pull request, and somebody looks at your code and says, hey, fix A, B, and C. And so you get the cheat. Like, I don't see LLMs replacing engineers. I see LLMs making engineers move faster. And so I really hope that more people in security sort of latch on to that thing that you get out of it.
Let's talk about response. So you gave a really good engineering focused answer to that. What about when it comes to triage and response and preventing and things like that?
I am really, really excited to be in a place where I can just grab all of the event data from a specific like security event and say, here's everything else that happened at the same time, and dump it into Gemini. So I think you have like 2 million or 4 million tokens worth of context available. I don't have to do a lot of eye grepping like I did in the past, right? I can just say, grab me these 15 minutes of logs, pull out, here's what I'm worried about, pull it out. Is it going to give me a hit every time? Is it going to miss things? Probably. But is it better than someone sitting and just being overloaded by the sheer amount of data that they would have to look through? Absolutely. And so again, I think it's just those little wins that we can get to speed things up. Maybe even check my work, right? This is what I think happened. Did I miss anything? That's another really good use case. The only downside to all of this is I'm speaking with the benefit of someone who has bedrock. So any data that I send to an LLM is mine and my company's, right? I'm speaking from the benefit of someone who has a Gemini API key, so I can just spend the company's money analyzing that data versus I still don't know how to feel about sending sensitive, not sensitive, but it's sensitive log event data, security event data to a random LLM. It gives me the vibes of, hey, you probably shouldn't upload that to VirusTotal.
What techniques have you found helpful when it comes to doing LLM data analysis, like any tricks with prompts or formatting of events or anything like that?
I think too many times we're trying to say, no, 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 I'm a human and I know exactly what you need to give me back and it needs to be this. I think a lot of times the model is pretty smart. And so if you just give it the ability to look at all of the information and give you the response that it has decided that you want it versus locking it into this very specific thing, I think you get a lot better results. I think you get a lot better experience. We were talking today about the R1. And so if you buy one thing you'll learn quickly is it likes to talk. And the reason it likes to talk is because we hard coded in these specific spots. If this happens, I want you to give a response so that the customer knows that they're getting a response. If we were to take that away and just let the LLM make the decision to respond, it would probably decide a lot more often, like, hey, Jack doesn't care about this, so I'm just going to sit on that information. You can do the same thing with your automation that you're building out for security. Don't have it tell you these very specific things. It's a general agent. Have it give you a general answer so that you can sort of dive in after it's shown you what things you should look at. Does that make sense?
It's more of guiding the agent or the LLM to know when to expand details and know when to be concise.
Exactly. So, and it's fairly easy to do nowadays as far as giving it really good examples and having great stuff come out. The one thing that saddens me about every security product out there is they tell me they have Gen AI and they're like, oh, we have Gen AI and it's great. And here's all the things you can do about it. And I was like, okay, but here's my number one problem that you can solve with generative AI. Jira tickets. As an engineer, just not a security engineer, I'm I'm a software engineer writing code. I have this way that I write tickets and this language that I use within the culture of engineering. And so the way that we talk to each other when we're writing these tickets is very different than the way that a security engineer might write a vulnerability management ticket. I mean, if you open up, if you I don't know if you have Jira, but if you open it up right now and look at the last ticket that was cut about a vulnerability versus the last ticket that was cut for feature work, they're very different the way that they're worded. Typically, the security ones are very like buttoned up corporate, you must do this angry. And the product tickets are like, hey, these are facts. Here's an outcome that we'd like to achieve. And like, let's do it. It's going to be a great time. That's how I write my tickets. It would be great to have an LLM just parse through tickets, and from now on, when your tool finds a vulnerability, yes, you cut a ticket, but instead of just saying security, you need to do this, it actually uses the same language, the same speech patterns, the same terminology that your engineers are already using. Because then it's not us versus them; it's just us, and I think that's how we win as security people. But nobody's doing it, Jack. I don't know if you can like put in a good word to some of these software companies that I want my tickets to come out cooler. It would make me easier.
I'll see what I can do. Maybe we even could make it where it will output a poem at the end as well.
That would be pretty cool. Because then
Nice.
you feel better about your 5,000 critical vulnerabilities.
That's a really cool use case. Just in general, the idea of more natural interaction to accomplish a goal is a very nice benefit of a language model, which, they were designed for translation. And this is kind of a form of that. So it's a nice use case.
No, absolutely.
So we talked about the large context window with some of the new models. That's actually a really interesting development for log analysis. It removes the need to do pre-processing, which is really powerful. And a lot of people have even said like large context windows will just replace the need for RAG, for retrieval augmented generation. So that's also very positive. Talked about code gen and detection writing, things like that. I guess I'm curious, we're making this transition from a big emphasis on scale and data lakes to now a big emphasis on like AI agents. And I'm curious what you think is the bridge between those two worlds. Like, how does one impact the other? And
I think at the end of the day, we're still doing the same thing, right? We're protecting our data in 3 different information states. I'm a big fan of the Macomber cube. I used to teach, and that was my favorite thing ever to draw up. But so data in storage, data in transit, data in processing, it's one of the faces of the Macomber cube. And in reality, whether we're working with LLMs or we're just like handling data in a traditional way, we still have to worry about those things. I think it's less of a trade-off and more of an understanding how you apply the things from the old ways into the new thing.
data and storage comes into play quite a lot when we think about being able to run an arbitrary query and feed that into our LLM. So I think a lot of teams are still taking the data lake approach because they want the scalability aspects of it. And a lot has changed there where that data layer is becoming more and more agnostic. So I'm curious, what's been your experience in building out security data lakes and what lessons do you have from that?
I have 2 really big ones, which is when you ask for budget, you probably want to ask for double your budget because everybody, once they find out, oh, I have this place I can stick this useful data, wants to put their data there, and then they see your awesome report, and they want an awesome report too, and so they want to retrieve from there. So taking the time to meet with somebody who's an expert in sort of designing the cost for something to be at the scale that you're at, I think is super important. So if you're a startup like Rabbit, you probably don't have to dig super deep into that. But at some of the other places I've worked, if I said, oh, I'm going to create the security data lake, a bad architecture decision could add on like 3 zeros to my cost. And that's not great. I think starting off with a good design on how am I going to make this work for the amount of data that I want to put into it. The other piece is I'm a really big fan of queues, like AWS SQS and an AWS Lambda function. With those 2 things, I can do a lot of really cool stuff with all of my services. And whether that's pulling the latest logs off of an API from a vendor, or taking an actual action, making an API call to disable somebody's account. It's sort of those two building blocks. And so when you're planning things out, figure out which your key Legos are going to be, and then just make those super approachable for anybody who wants to pick them up. I built out again, just like a super simple S3 data lake with some SQS, Lambda, and ECS. And I documented the SQS usage and the ECS task usage very, very well. And that didn't document anything else. Went on vacation for a month. I came back and I have new detection tools. I have new data sources, but they're only using those two Legos because those were the two Legos that I documented really well. So when you're building it, pick like what your core technologies are going to be, and then make it really easy for anyone to come up and add to. I think that's super super helpful.
Very cool. Let's also talk through a little bit of serverless. So you did some writing on serverless security engineering. I mean, what compelled you to use serverless and how that helped you with your detection response?
So it looks really, really bad when you're the security person and you have Linux boxes that have not been updated in 6 months, right? And so my thought was twofold on this. One, the things that I'm generally doing are not something that is going to be running 24/7, 365. And so if this is for an ad hoc action, why not have ad hoc infrastructure? And then the additional benefit of I don't actually have to manage the operating system of these things. I just have to make sure that I update my Docker image once a month, and sort of life is easy. So that was really the core reasoning behind that. It makes the management overhead a lot lighter. The cost is certainly better. That's why serverless for that. I guess the other benefit you have too is if you're in like a cloud focused organization, well, it already has an identity. And so you don't have to worry about, oh, well, how do I get credentials for this resource? Well, you have a cloud identity, so you can just give that cloud identity access to the account that you're trying to reach into. And then if you do need a key, well, guess what? You already have a really awesome tool, either AWS Secrets Manager or Azure has one, Google has one. I don't know their names. But you already have all of these Legos that you need to build the cool thing. So that was really why serverless. The other benefits, like it can scale up super super quick, and so if I onboard 10,000 Sentinel-1 systems tomorrow for some reason, well, my Lambda will be able to run just a lot more times, and things will keep up. And then I don't have to worry about a huge bill because I forgot to scale it back down. Right, it just spins down as the load decreases. So that's another nice thing.
That's also cost element too, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I'm a huge fan of serverless. I think as a lot of people know too. We've been preaching it for a while and kind of cut my teeth on it during the Lambda days early on. And yeah, totally agree with you. The cost side, the simplification of security, it's really nice.
Have you figured out a good way to do like infrastructure as code for serverless? Because that's been the one thing that always slows any project I see down. It's like, we're a Terraform shop. Okay, but I want to use Lambda. Technically, the support's there, right?
Yeah, but a lot of people tend to not use infra as code for applications because of how ephemeral they are. So,
Okay.
for example, like you'll use like Docker Swarm or trying to think of like basically it's like Kubernetes, right? And you might use IAC to spin up the cluster, but you're using Kubernetes itself to actually manage the orchestration. So they tend to be separated. We use tools like CloudFormation, Pulumi, etc., for doing it. And there's been a lot of changes over time where they've become more like programming languages versus declarative. So like Amazon has the CDK that's exactly for this purpose, and that gives you a lot more flexibility with sort of the ephemerality of an application plus the structure of IAC. So something kind of in there is what we found useful. But yeah, I agree with you. Using Terraform as it is, it's too hard. You just have to flip a lot of manual bits too often, and that gets annoying.
I got super lucky when I joined. Rabbit just finished a migration out of GCP and into AWS. Everything was fresh, shiny. Terraform, infrastructure as code, perfect. And that's the best time to join as a security person, because you can just grab the keys to the repo and say, okay, if you want to make changes to prod, you have to do a PR. It's amazing. I still have my nice shiny 100% IAC AWS accounts. Kubernetes is another story, though. Like you mentioned, like those get managed differently.
IAC is a good pattern even for AI too, because if you think about agents being able to reason about their environment, that's like the easiest way to get it versus having to call an API and sort of build that context from scratch.
I didn't even think about that. Like, hey, here's the design of the environment that I'm giving you logs for. There it
Oh,
is. Oh, that's super cool.
and I have like a draft blog about things like this, where it's what type of context do you need to be able to give an agent for it to accurately triage alerts and just better understand the strategy of your security program, right? And there's things like pulling out process documentation from like a wiki. There's pulling out your cloud infrastructure as code. You know, there's just so many things. Someone actually mentioned something today on the call where they were like, I would love to be able to search Slack for a particular string in any public channel and pull those messages back and then correlate that against activity that we see, you know, like it's just really cool what we can start doing when we have machines that understand language. You know, it is so limitless. So very exciting.
I'm still just super stoked about the Terraform thing that you just mentioned, because the time it takes to get spun up on, okay, but what services do we have, and like how does this actually work? Is this expected? Well, now it can give you a better answer. The Slack hot words thing too. Like I have hot words set up for like password, credit card, payment information, so I get pings in Slack, but those are noisy. I really do want an LLM just to look at all of those for me and tell me, hey Domko, you need to check like these 3 conversations because there's something substantial there. And it's just time, and then having ChatGPT build you the Slack integration, right?
It is really interesting where that's going to go, right? Like because there's so many competing products for LLMs and Mistral. I don't know if you follow Mistral, but they literally just released their chat, and they also are teasing this idea of agents built in that I think can be community built. So you might start to see a lot of people building like that. So it's going to be interesting where this ecosystem goes in the next year.
I remember, I don't know if it was like 2 years or so ago, being like, man, it would be really good if I could just guarantee that the LLM always provides JSON. And then like 6 months later that happened, and that's a thing that certain services can guarantee you. Going forward, the magic that they're going to be able to make happen, like it's just everything's going to get better. I haven't seen much getting faster though, and that's the only part that bothers me, because new faster models come out, but usually it's like a reduced capability. So yes, we made it faster, but it's also dumber. I just want it faster too, and then my life gets super easy.
Yeah, it's common in agents to use different models for different parts of the flow. So it's like summarization. It's really great for the smaller models. And like you said, I want it to be smarter when I need it to be, but how can we make it faster and smarter? I think that's kind of what we're trying to figure out right now in general. Well, Domko, it's been a really interesting conversation, and we'll love to conclude with just 3 pieces of advice that you have for folks starting their security programs today in detection and maybe incorporating some of the cool AI hotness we talked about today.
Starting out your program, it's really easy to get tied up in like, these are requirements. And we had these at my last company. Your last company is a totally different company than this company. And so paying attention to what this company's business needs and where you're at as far as the program goes, I think it's like the best thing for starting a new program out. The second piece, that's really 2. So this is number 3. Be an engineer. Don't be the typical security person that walks around with a stick. You'll have such an easier time, and you'll enjoy your life more if you go to people and say, how can I help make this more secure, as compared to, why isn't this done yet?
Great advice. Love it. Well, Domko, it was great to have you on the show. Thanks so much for the time and If you all want to read longer form topics like what we discussed today, go to detectionscale.com and check out some of the blogs there. We're talking a lot about Gen AI right now. Matt, thanks again. Pleasure having you on.
Same. Appreciate it.